When I went off to Vicar College in Nottingham in the early to mid-90s, it began a number of years settling in the East Midlands, which was a particular interest for me because I'd been researching my family history, and I was aware more than ever of my paternal roots, which ran very deep in Leicestershire, and particularly in the northeast corner of Leicestershire, the rural villages clustered around the market town of Melton Mowbray. I had a sense of coming to my ancestral roots and being close to those who had gone before. So I had my couple of years at Vicar College in Nottingham, and then I took up a curacy to begin my ministry as a Rev on the edge of Leicester itself, and this was about 20 plus miles from Melton Mowbray. I was ordained, and then one of the first appointments I had within those first few days following my ordination, I was required to go as the new curate to the grand excitement of the Mothers' Union tea party in the church hall. And I can remember walking through the door and seeing this hall filled with a vast sea of elderly ladies of the parish, none of whom I knew, and many of whom knew each other. And I thought, well, here goes ministry. Is this all going to be rather mundane and trivial? It'd be nice to think there was a sense of grand purpose and design in the whole thing. However, let's get on with it. Where do I begin? So I told myself, just look for a chair, sit on a random table, and see what conversation comes. So I found a spare chair, and I conversed with the lady next to me, a lady who was in her 90s, but a delightful lady by the name of Molly, and we got chatting and introduced each other. And I told Molly that I did have some Leicestershire connections, that my granddad had been born and bred in Leicestershire. And she said to me, where did he come from? And I said, well, it's a little village, it's about 25 miles from here, you've probably never even heard of it. It's called Garthorpe, very small village. And Molly said that her grandfather had been the vicar of Garthorpe in the early years of the 20th century, and that she used to regularly visit Garthorpe and her grandparents at the vicarage there, and would often spend a lot of time with them. Our conversation developed, and it turned out that Molly's grandfather had christened my granddad on Christmas Day, 1908, when Molly would have been about 5 years old. And Molly said that she would often spend Christmases at Garthorpe with her grandparents. My granddad would have been christened in the main Christmas service, I suspect. And I said to Molly, does that mean it's possible you were at my granddad's christening? And she said, yes, I suppose I could have been. So we had this delightful, engaging conversation. I was quite awestruck by the serendipity of meeting Molly, my first proper conversation as a curate in parochial ministry. And we spoke for quite a while. And I said, Molly, I ought to talk to one or two other people, if you don't mind. It's been wonderful talking with you, and I turned to the lady on the other side of me, and her name was Vi. And I said to Vi, I've just had this lovely conversation with Molly. My granddad came from this tiny little village 25 miles away, and it turns out Molly's grandfather was the vicar in prison, my granddad. And Vi said to me, well, that's interesting. My husband came from Garthall. And it turned out that Vi's late husband had been neighbour in the same row of terrace cottages with my granddad, who had passed on a few years before, and no doubt they would have known each other growing up. What are the chances of such a thing happening? It's truly remarkable, and a lovely illustration that life is woven together in a beautifully designed way that we may only glimpse a tiny portion of at special moments in life, but perhaps one day when we stand back and look at it all, we will get a true and full impression of the way in which everything fits together and nothing is random and all is meant to be and all has a purpose and a design by a master designer, our creator, the one for whom providence is at the core of his very being.